Hello. Thanks, Glenn. Have the unfortunate task of following a couple of tough acts, so thank you to Arnie Sherl for that very warm welcome, and also to Anne for that very passionate talk on home mods and maintenance and some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that lie ahead of us into the future. So I think I've got around 15 minutes this morning to run through what is potentially quite a lot of information around the new home support program that's been proposed. So I'll try and run through the overview fairly quickly and then spend a bit more time specifically on home mods and home maintenance. So as Glenn mentioned, there's a discussion paper that's been released from the 20th of May. It's open for a 6-week period of consultation, so that closes on Monday next week, the 30th of June. And that's been developed in consultation with the National Aged Care Alliance. So there's certainly people here today, including Michelle, who chaired the Service Group 5 review as part of that advisory and consultative process that the government's engaged with in terms of the aged care sector more broadly. So very quickly, I guess to put that in context, we are very much the discussion paper phase in terms of development. That proposes, based on a number of reviews and advice from the National Aged Care Alliance and others, the proposed directions for the home support program. But it does mean that we are still in that consultation phase. So we're very keen to listen and learn and hear from people in a variety of forums, including this one today, which will allow us to then refine the program as we move forward and then get into the implementation phase. So that has, I guess, both pros and cons. On the one hand, it means that we are able to take on board the feedback that we receive, both through written submissions and the sort of comments and questions we get today. But it also means that we don't have a level of detail that some people might be interested in. So I saw some of the questions late yesterday that might come up in the panel discussion today. A lot of those we'll be able to talk through, but some of them get into quite a fine grain of detail, which we might not be able to cover at this stage. So, very quickly, the home support program will commence on 1 July 2015, and it will bring together 3, potentially 4 of the existing home support programs that exist. So that includes the Commonwealth HACK program. That's in 2012, the Commonwealth took over HACK for older clients in 6 jurisdictions, apart from Victoria and WA. The National Respite for Carers program, the Day Therapy Centres program, and also potentially the Assistance with Care and Housing for the Aged program. That last one, ACHA, there's still consideration in the discussion paper explicitly asks the question about whether or not that should form part of the home support program, or given the specialised nature, including the often slightly younger age group, whether or not that should be maintained as a separate program. In terms of Vic and WA, there's separate arrangements there. In the context of the NDIS negotiations, Victoria's agreed to a transition for older HACK clients from July 15. Like the other 6 jurisdictions, there'll be an initial period of stability there for HACK providers. So that was the case, yeah, in New South Wales from 2012 to 2015. In WA, there's been early negotiations there about a similar transition for older HACK clients, but they're continuing. While those discussions and negotiations take place, the jointly funded HACK program will continue in Western Australia. To give you a bit of a sense of the size and scope of the home support program, from 2015 when it commences, it will comprise around $2 billion worth of annual funding, be delivered through around 2,000 providers, and provide services to around 800,000 clients. One of the most obvious changes is that there will be, from July 2015, a single consolidated basic home support program. It will, rather than just simply being a consolidation, one of the really key reform directions, though, is to refocus those programs into that basic tier of home support. So the premise there is that it will provide a small amount of care and support to a very large number of older clients, so around 800,000 it's projected. That's contrasted with other parts of the aged care system, so things like home care packages or residential care, which can offer much higher levels of care, but progressively to smaller numbers of clients. So this is following on from some research, including by Anna Howe, around it's that initial first intervention that's often very effective in keeping older people within their homes. Secondly, and this is consistent with some of the things that Anne picked up around the vision for MOD.A, is there'll be a much stronger focus on wellness and re-ablement within the program. That'll be implemented through a variety of things, starting off through the assessment process through My Aged Care, which will include a national assessment framework and tool, and then also looking to build on the current investment in things like HAC Allied Health and day therapy centres and things like goods and equipment and home mods and so on, as part of that push to make sure that we maximise the independence of older people. There'll be a much more targeted approach to sector support and development. Part of that will be looking at which activities can be supported through some of our bigger funding streams. So if people are familiar with the flexible funds that we have, the Aged Care Workforce Development Fund and also the Aged Care Service Improvement and Healthy Ageing Grants Fund, which is a bit of a mouthful. Everyone just refers to that as AXI-HAG. They're quite large funds that are intended to deliver at a sort of sector or system level. So a number of the things in home support into the future, particularly things around workforce, we intend to approach at more of a sector level rather than at a program specific level. Having said that, there are in the discussion paper 4 areas that are set out where we would propose to target sector support and development under the home support program. And they're things like support for volunteers, implementation of a wellness approach throughout all of service delivery, transition to the new arrangements from July 15. I've just gone blank on the 4th, but that'll come to me. In addition, from July 2015, there'll be a nationally consistent fees policy. This was announced, I think it was September 2013. And so that's intended to be increase the amount of program costs that are generated from fees from around 5% that we have nationally at the moment to around 15% when it's fully implemented over the next few years. For clients, that'll mean a fairer system where clients of similar means pay consistent fees and with appropriate safeguards for those who are least able to contribute towards the cost of the care. For providers, and this is particularly the case for home mods, that fee structure will acknowledge the different cost drivers in different service types. So we're likely to have different arrangements as they apply to things like domestic assistance compared to home mods. Part of that fees policy will also seek to remove some of the financial disincentives for clients to move between different parts of the aged care system, and that's particularly around moving between home support and home care packages. And finally, the implementation of the home support program will be supported by an identifiable entry point to the aged care system through My Aged Care. It's awkward to cover that now, given Anne's discussion of some of the challenges with the access point in New South Wales over the last period. But again, that's something that the department's working very closely with the sector on. There's substantial consultation arrangements. People might have gone along to I think it was the proof of concept roadshow that My Aged Care ran a few weeks ago. And again, under the National Aged Care Alliance, there's various advisory groups and consultation processes to try and make sure that's well informed and rolls out smoothly. In addition to the elements I've already touched on about the home support program, one of the key benefits is that there will now be common arrangements across Australia in respect of things like the target group and eligibility, client assessment, reporting, quality assurance, information and data collection, and also planning and allocation of funds. And there's also intended to be very clear gains for providers around a reduction in red tape. So at the moment, as an example around reporting, if you receive money through HAC and maybe respite for carers and day therapy centres, there's a variety of different reports, including MDS, output variation reports, service activity reports, quality reporting, ad hoc reports. So there's a multitude of things at the moment, and we're looking to consolidate those into a single program with a single set of reporting arrangements. Within the program, there's also a fairly significant consolidation proposed. So across those 4 programs, there's over 30 service types. And the discussion paper sets out around 15 that we propose to consolidate to as part of home support. The discussion paper also has an attachment which sort of maps how those different bits from the existing 4 programs are intended to come in to the 15 service types under home support, including how they group by outcome. And again, one of the benefits of the implementation of My Aged Care nationally will be that consistent assessment process, including a standardised national tool. Funding and contracting arrangements for the new program haven't been settled, but the discussion paper does set out a number of elements that are being proposed. Overall, it's not proposed that we move away from the traditional block funding in the short term. So the National Aged Care Alliance recommended over the longer term a mixed model, so a combination of block funding for some services and then individualised funding for others. The discussion paper proposes in the first instance that we maintain block funding and include some of the rationale for why we think it would be challenging to move to individualised funding from July 15. That issue around individualised funding is one that is explicitly acknowledged as being part of what will be considered through the major review of aged care reforms, which happened, I think, in 2016-17. In terms of other program arrangements, given the size of the program, so around $2 billion in 2015-16, it's important to consider the ways in which contestability or competitive processes can be used to maximise client outcomes and ensure value for money. So the discussion paper sets out 3 areas where we're proposing to allocate funds through a competitive process. One of those is through the establishment of regional assessment services under My Aged Care. The other one is the bulk of sector support and development funding. And the third one is future growth. It's possible that some other parts of the program may also be subject to competitive processes, but decisions haven't been taken on that yet. So we certainly acknowledge that's an area that's had a fair bit of feedback and uncertainty within the sector, and over the coming months we'll be providing advice on that once decisions are taken and communicating that broadly to the sector. So that's a very brief overview of home support generally, and again, as part of the panel discussion, more than happy to answer questions on those aspects. But in terms of home mods and home maintenance as part of home support, so as has briefly been mentioned, there was a review undertaken by KPMG that was overseen by an advisory group of the Aged Care Alliance, and certainly people here today have been part of that process. More broadly, that group included representatives from the State Council, AXA New South Wales ACT, the OT Association, LifeTech in Queensland, National Seniors, a rep from South Australian Government, Macular Disease Foundation, Laser, Vets Affairs, and also Easier Living Services. So I'd certainly like to acknowledge the work of Anne and Michelle and others who've been involved in that work. So, and the final report of that has now concluded. We're just going through the last processes at the sort of department end to then put that up on our website. So in the next week or so, we'd hope to make that available. In terms of the meaty stuff about what was found and what's proposed to apply from July 2015, this slide sets out that the home support program is intending to focus on simple, lower-cost modifications. We know from the current data that around 90% of home mods nationally are under 1,000 from the Commonwealth contribution. I think it's a total of about 98% are under 10,000. Having said that, we do know that in some states, particularly New South Wales, there is a higher proportion that are over that 10,000 Commonwealth contribution that's being proposed. We acknowledge the importance of having specialised assessment, particularly for more complex home mods, and that includes things like OT assessment. There was a view that there's confusion in the current HAC manual, that there's a different standard or different requirements around who can undertake home mods, so we're being quite clear that that's set out in the state and territory legislation. We're not looking to add any additional layers on top of that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the fees policy that will be developed across all of home support will take into account the different factors in different service types, including home mods. Briefly, in terms of home maintenance services, so again, these will be maintained within the home support program, but the intent is to focus on those activities that are effective in supporting older people to stay in their own homes and maintain their independence. So one of the things that generated a lot of discussion in the Service Group 5 subgroup was around things like garden maintenance and lawn mowing, and that's why there's a point on there around the frequency of ongoing services, just to ensure that they are directly correlated to assess client need and subject to review. So there is the discussion paper. As has been mentioned, we're very keen to get people's feedback on not only the parts that relate to home mods and home maintenance, but other parts that are dealt with in that discussion paper. That's open for submissions until Monday. There's a particular part, dss.gov.au/chsp, where there's a discussion paper, some fact sheets, frequently asked questions, and a template for submissions. There's also an inbox that comes through to my team, so chsp@dss.gov.au, where if people have got feedback or any questions, then we can respond through there. Yeah, so I think that's about it within the time I have. Thank you.